Did you know that there are 6 simple strategies that you can use at home to get rid of toxic estrogen in your water and in your food? Hi, and welcome to the Wild Wisdom Show. I'm Dr. Patricia Mills, a holistic medical doctor with a root cause approach to health. And today we're going to talk about how to get rid of toxic estrogen in your food and water. And I find that when I introduce these kinds of topics where it requires action in order to maintain your optimal hormone health, which affects your whole body health, it's really helpful to understand the context of the problem. And in order to understand the context of this issue of toxic estrogens, we need to understand what are the toxic estrogens in our food and water, and are they present in amounts sufficient enough for us to be worried about it so that we can then be motivated to engage in these 6 strategies to reduce toxic estrogen in our food and water? So let's dive in. We can divide hormones into many different kinds of categories, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to divide it into human hormones, so the hormones that we make in our own body, and hormones that are called xenohormones. And in the case of estrogen, it's xenoestrogen. So XENO estrogen. And xenoestrogen, that word derives from xeno, which is foreign in Latin. And these are estrogens that look like our estrogens. So they mimic the effects of estrogen in our body, but they are not produced in our human body. And so, therefore, they do actually have the potential to have different effects compared to our own estrogen. And this gets really interesting because xenoestrogens can affect our body in different ways. They can bind to the receptors of estrogen. So when we think of hormones like estrogen, they're like a key. And when they're produced by a hormone producing organ the ovaries, or hormones produced by the testes. And by the way, men also have estrogen. So this is an important conversation for both men and women. And so men and women have what are called receptors for estrogen, which are receptors are like the lock. So if the hormone is the key, receptors are like the lock. And these receptors sit on the cell membranes of our cells. So when the hormone is produced by the organ that makes the hormone, it floats around in the blood, and then it affects our body by entering these receptors like a lock and key mechanism, opening up the receptor so that the cell then has different functions inside of it activated as a result. Okay. And that function in the case of insulin, for example, is to let sugar into the cells, or glucose into the cells. In the case of estrogen, it creates various signals inside of the cell that tells our cells what to do. So depending on what phase we are in our life, whether we are in utero in our mama's belly, or we've just been born and we're developing sexually, both female and males, or we're going through puberty, we're in our fertile years, maybe we're then in our menopause or andropause for men, we're going to experience different effects from that estrogen. And there's different kinds of estrogen. In humans, there's about 3 different kinds of estrogen, and those are estradiol, estriol, and estrone. And xenoestrogens, they can bind these estrogen receptors. So they look enough like our hormones that they can go in and bind them. But because they are different, they can actually have different effects. For example, some of the bad xenoestrogens will go in, bind to the receptor, and then just sit there. They won't remove themselves. So that receptor is continuously activated, continuously sending a signal. So the body thinks that there's way more estrogen in it than there actually is. So that's an example of how a bad xenoestrogen can cause the body to experience excess estrogen in the body. And this can be experienced as estrogen dominance. It can lead to things like estrogen excessive cancers. So it's a real issue that we all have to be paying attention to. So some xenoestrogens, not all of them are bad. Some of them are good in the sense that they can have a very similar effect to our estrogens. And that can be good if we need more estrogen in the body. For example, let's say we're in menopause, or maybe we have osteoporosis and we need a little bit more estrogen activity at the level of the bones. But however, if there's a different effect, Or if you don't need more estrogen, then the overall effect of that xenoestrogen is bad in the body. So we're going to cover what are some good xenoestrogens, what are some bad xenoestrogens, and what we can do to get rid of the bad ones in that are coming into us in our water, through our water and our food. And if you're watching me live, please feel free to put in your comments and questions so that I can answer them for you. That's the benefit of joining live today. So here we go. The good xenoestrogens you may have heard of, they're called phytoestrogens. And most phytoestrogens, not all, but most have a beneficial effect in the body so long as it's not overdone and in it's the right time and so on. So for example, soy is a well-known product that has phytoestrogens. Okay. So we know that these, in certain circumstances, eating soy up to a certain amount can actually be very helpful in terms of that phytoestrogen effect in the body. Now, bad xenoestrogens are, for example, animal hormones. So, for example, oral contraceptive pills are made out of mare's urine, so a pregnant horse's urine. And the urine of horses actually does not look very much like ours because they do have quite a few different hormones, different estrogens than we do. So while it can be beneficial in terms of working as a contraceptive, there are concerns that these non-human hormones can actually cause some negative effects in the human body. So there's some valid concerns regarding that. Also, there's a livestock that pee out, their hormones to their pee just like we do. That can get into our water supply. And if it's not properly filtered, then it's in the water. Then there's this interesting group of what's called synthetic, so not from nature. These are human made, what are called endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. And endocrine means a hormone producing gland, or the hormone system in the body. That's the fancy word for that in medical terms or in research. And these endocrine disrupting chemicals, basically, they're chemicals that disrupt the hormone functioning in the body. For example, bisphenol. And you may have heard a while back that bisphenol A, which was present in not just the plastic in our water bottles, but also is present in cleaning products, like for house cleaning, personal care products, cosmetics, and plastic containers for food. It's been identified as being a significant endocrine disrupting chemical, and there's a lot of action right now to get that removed from our supply chain. Also, medications can be mimicking xenoestrogens, mimicking hormones. And so these can be problematic depending on what medication you're taking. And the thing is, people are taking medications, peeing them out, and there is some concern that it's getting into our water supply. Now, some phytoestrogens and mycoestrogens, this is interesting. So the estrogens from fungi, so fungi or fungus can make these compounds, these toxins called mycotoxins. And when they look like estrogens, they're called mycoestrogens, which is, I actually didn't know this until I started looking into this research. And they can contaminate fruits, corn, peanuts, and other nuts, wheat, oats, rice, and other whole grains. So I'll be talking about some strategies to reduce those as well. And there's some, debate and thought that sometimes a peanut allergy is actually not an allergy to the peanut, but an allergy to the mycotoxins. Some people just might be very sensitive to mycotoxins in things like peanuts. So another place where it can be found is in coffee beans as well. Now, the question about whether or not the hormones in birth control and from women and men taking hormone replacement therapy getting in the water is problematic, we don't know. We know it's in the water. It seems like it counts for less than 1% of xenoestrogens in our drinking water supply. So this is after it's been filtered. And then whether or not that can cause problems in our hormone balance is not yet known. Okay, so we know it's in our water, in our drinking water. We know it's in very small amounts. And we're not sure what effects those are. But with the endocrine disrupting chemicals, the EDCs, we actually know that in the levels that they're present in the environment, they are affecting human health in a negative way. And so there's actually a definition for EDCs in research and by researchers and scientists, and they call it compounds that interfere with the synthesis or the making of the secretion. So letting, like, they make it in the organ and then they dump it into the bloodstream. The transport, so the transporting of the hormones through the blood, the binding, and that's the binding to the receptor that I was speaking about, like the lock and key mechanism. And then the action, so the effect that it has within the cell as a result of it looking but not being exactly like our estrogen. And then the elimination of natural hormones in the body. So again, it interferes with the synthesis, secretion, transport, binding, action, or elimination of natural hormones in the body. And the elimination part is interesting because the hormones, any hormone, whether it's our own natural hormone or xenoestrogens or xenohormones, are eliminated or detoxified through the liver and then eliminated either through the gut primarily or through the urine. So when you have a lot of these guys coming in through our environment, it can actually overwhelm the system and make it difficult for the liver to detoxify our own natural hormones, including estrogen. And this is such a concern, right? If you're, and don't worry, I'm going to give you a solution to this problem. I will never give you a problem without a solution. That I promise you. However, I really want to emphasize that this is a problem, and to the point where the World Health Organization in 2012 developed a document that you can actually find online called State of the Science of Endocrine Disrupting Chemicals 2012. So this was in collaboration with the United Nations Environmental Program, and they did this because they recognized that most people, if not everybody, to a certain extent, because of the global nature of environmental pollution and environmental toxins, are being exposed to sufficient levels of these xenoestrogens and endocrine disrupting chemicals to cause health concerns. And the health concerns that they have linked directly to EDCs are spontaneous abortions, premature births, abnormal sexual development and puberty. So for girls, they get puberty too early. Boys, they get delayed puberty. Behavioral disorders related to the effects of these xenoestrogens and endocrine disrupting chemicals on the brain. The brain has receptors for every hormone that your body produces, and those EDCs will go in and interact with the brain. So there's concerns around autism and ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder. All these things could be related to EDCs. There's concerns with menstruation issues, so menstrual irregularities, infertility, changes in libido, problems with thyroid health, certain specific conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids, endometriosis, diabetes, obesity, and cancers have been directly linked to EDCs in humans from environmental exposure through our food, our water, our cleaning products, our cosmetics. So this is a real issue, and we're going to need to dive into it because EDCs are found in our drinking water, food, packaging of drinking water and food, preservatives and food additives, pesticides and herbicides, and as I mentioned, personal care products, house cleaning products, and cosmetics. So we want to understand that this contaminated water then enters fruits and vegetables. That's how fruits and vegetables actually contain these xenoestrogens. Animals drink the contaminated water and are also given xenoestrogen hormones. So they're we all know about hormone added right to our animals. Now, not all animals have this issue, and I'll be sharing with you which ones are safer to buy than others. And then us humans, we drink the contaminated water and we eat the contaminated fruit, vegetables, and meat unknowingly. We then heat up our food in plastic containers or drink from plastic water bottles. And this all increases our burden of xenoestrogen. So it's not that one time drinking from a plastic water bottle or heating up your food in plastic is going to do the damage. It's an ongoing accumulation. And why are babies experiencing these problems? Because they've shown the presence of these EDCs in the placenta, in the umbilical cord, so in the blood that's being given to the baby from the mother, and in breast milk. So this is how it can start to happen very early. And so we're reaching a tipping point earlier and earlier with every generation, right? Because this is a relatively new issue of contamination of synthetic xenoestrogens, right? And endocrine disrupting chemicals that are getting into our water and food supply. So we need to know the 6 strategies to reduce these toxic estrogens in food and water. Remember, estrogen is a necessary hormone for human health in men and women. What we don't want is too much of the wrong kind in the wrong place, or even too much of the good kind in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we're going to address getting rid of too much of the wrong kind. Remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I look forward to answering them for you should anything come up for you from watching this. So let's dive in. Number 1, please, if you have any plastic containers to store your food, only use them when the food is cold. And ideally never, but if you want to keep your plastic containers because you feel bad throwing them out and they're handy for going on, for traveling, that kind of thing. The thing you need to know is that as soon as that plastic starts getting warm, either from the sun hitting it or from heating it up like in the microwave, that plastic contains xenoestrogens and endocrine disrupting chemicals, and it enters your food. Period. It does. There's research to prove it. So it's not a question, does it enter my food? It's like, it enters my food. So don't do that. That's a very old-fashioned way of heating up your food. You need to be a modern person in this modern world. So what you want to do is you want to use glass containers. So I use glass baking dishes, for example, to bake my food in, okay? You want to use ceramic, so ceramic pots or stoneware, and stainless steel, using stainless steel on the, in the stove, for example, to heat up your food. You want to minimize your exposure to any toxins, avoiding non-stick, pans or ways to heat up your food. That non-stick chemical is also very harmful for your health. And that chemical in the non-stick Teflon-like materials can actually and do enter your food and then enter your body and cause problems. Again, that is not like a debate. That is actually proven in research. So use glass, ceramic, or stainless steel to store and heat up your foods, okay? And then the same thing, strategy number 2 is do not buy water in plastic bottles. The problem is that water could have been sitting in a plastic bottle in a transport truck under the heat of the midday sun for hours on end, for days on end. And that plastic water bottle will release its xenoestrogen-like chemicals like bisphenol A into that water, which you will then drink. And your body becomes the filter for those chemicals. It'll get stuck up in your body and you will absorb those chemicals and they will cause harm in your body. That again is not up for debate. That is a fact. So what you want to do is you want to get really comfortable and make it a habit to start bringing around a glass or stainless steel water bottle. So get rid of your plastic water bottles and just use a stainless steel or a glass option and fill up your water before you leave your home. Bring your water with you. Now, again, and I even bring my water bottles to the airport, right? I empty them before going through security. I bring them to the other side. I fill them up in the water fountain. Now, if you're stuck and the only water available to drink is in a plastic bottle and there's no other option, don't sweat the small stuff, okay? The occasional exposure, your body can deal with it. And again, I'll be giving you a resource for that. But you do not want to make it a habit, right? Do not do that. And don't leave any of your plastic water bottles, if should you have them, in sunlight or in heat or in a hot car. That will make it way worse. Another thing that people don't often think about is we like to do healthy things like drink tea, boil some water to drink tea. What you don't want to do is use a plastic-lined kettle or a BPA-lined kettle. There are now kettles that are primarily lined with stainless steel or glass. So those are the kind of kettles that you want to invest in. And there's this study that actually showed when they took 10 bottle water samples out of water in plastic bottles, 7 out of 10 of them had detectable estrogenic activity. So they had so 70% at least of your water that you buy and water in plastic bottles is contaminated with xenoestrogens. And they found that food that was packaged again in plastics, about 44% had contamination. That plastic transferred to the food. So you really want to pay attention to strategy number one and number two. The interesting thing is that you may find some hard plastic, bottles, water bottles, for example, that say BPA free. What they've done is they've replaced the BPA with another chemical like bisphenol S, which was thought to be safer, but now they're starting to find that bisphenol S may actually have problems as well. So again, if you just stick with stainless steel or glass, that is going to definitely be the safer way to go. Now, what you want to do at home for your drinking water, because remember I said that they have detected xenoestrogens in our drinking water supply. And while we don't know if the problems we're encountering from EDCs are coming from the drinking water, if it's in sufficient amounts, or if it's from, the food and all the other contaminants, pesticides, that kind of thing, it really is important to just try to reduce like its risk reduction. So what you want to do is invest in a good carbon filter for your water. Now that could be a water pitcher, like you have a water pitcher with a carbon filter. You fill it with water, you let it drain, and then the water that drained water has less of these, estrogens and endocrine disrupting chemicals. Or you could buy what you can install under the counter of your sink, a carbon filter, so that all the water coming out of that sink, that faucet, has been filtered through that carbon filter. You do have to replace it once a year. Be sure to do that. And then the other option is a reverse osmosis system that has carbon filters in it. Now, with RO, reverse osmosis, the only downside is it filters everything, like all the minerals. So you have to add those minerals back in, right? So just to be aware that sometimes we can do a really good job of filtering, but you have to compensate for that by putting back in the minerals that are naturally found in water that are very healthy, actually, and help us properly hydrate. If you don't have enough minerals, that water is not optimally hydrating your tissues. Now, I often get this question, which is the best carbon filter water pitcher that I can buy? I actually have an account with consumerlab.com. So I pay a fee and I get to go in and log in and access their reviews. And they did do an extensive review on water pitchers, so the water filter pitchers. However, what I have to say is that it is very confusing to navigate those reviews because there are so many things that can be filtered from water, including microplastics, endocrine disrupting chemicals like PFAs, lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, fluoride, chlorine. And the truth is that there is no one filter that does everything the best. There's a filter that does fluoride really well, and another filter that does chlorine really well, another filter that does PFAs and microplastics really well. So it was really hard to find one amazing filter. The one I could see that had the best for the xenoestrogens and EDCs was one by AquaGear, AQUAGEAR. It removed 59% of the PFAs and microplastics with minimum carbon particles added, because some companies use carbon filter that actually adds carbon to the water, and that for some people is considered not desirable. Now, what you need to know is that when they say this removes 99% of whatever, oftentimes the consumer lab found that it's not 99%. In the case of AquaGear, they said that they removed 99%, but it was actually 59%. And despite that, they were still the best for removing those EDCs. So interestingly, if you want to get deep into this, I recommend purchasing a membership with Consumer Lab for whatever time you need to go in and look at those kinds of reviews and see why not the Travel Berkeley or Brita filters and all these other filters out there. They do have some benefits for other types of removal like fluoride and chlorine and that kind of thing. So if you really want to dive into this, I recommend investing in that membership so you can see for yourself what might be best in terms of your health concerns, like what you want to get rid of. So, strategy number 4 is that you want to avoid animal products that have had hormones added to that animal while they were alive. They're actually given hormones, like injected hormones, that kind of thing. Now, what you need to know is that in the US and Canada, they cannot add hormones to chicken, but they can add it to beef and red meat, and they can add it to farmed fish. So, what you want to look for is that no hormones added, label. Ideally, it also comes with the no antibiotics added label. But with chicken, you don't have to worry about the hormones, but you may want to consider, chickens that don't have antibiotics added and that kind of thing. So, you just want to get savvy in terms of what you're purchasing. Okay. And again, wild caught fish that's low in mercury, the smaller fish like salmon, mackerel, anchovy, sardines, herring, those ones generally wild caught will have the lowest amount of toxins compared to farm fish, which can have hormones added, unfortunately. It's something I found out when I was doing this research. And to be honest, it surprised me. I was like, oh, goodness, I never even thought of that. So there you go. Strategy number 5 is to reduce the mycotoxins and pesticides in your healthy foods, like your fruits and your grains and your corn and your nuts, right? So, here are some strategies. Interestingly, when we ferment whole grains, such as making sourdough bread, it does reduce the amount of mycotoxins and pesticides in that grain. So a sourdough bread is better than a non-sourdough bread when it comes to exposure to these mycotoxins, which are mycoestrogens, and pesticides, which are xenoestrogens. Okay, they can act like xenoestrogens, some of them. Um, the other thing you need to know is that when you soak your fruits and vegetables, if they are sprayed, if they're not organic, so they've got pesticides on them because they've been sprayed during the process of harvesting or before that. If you soak them in a solution of baking soda, so if you take 2 cups of water, for every 2 cups of water that you use for soaking, you add 2 teaspoons of water. So if you use 6 cups of water, you would be adding 6 teaspoons of baking soda, and you soak it for at least 15 minutes. That will remove most of the pesticides and will help with the mycotoxin load of that fruit. So like, apples and pears and grapes and all those kinds of things that can be helpful. Now, it removes it from the outside. Any pesticide that has soaked into that apple or grape is still in there. So it's a reduction, but it's not 100% elimination. That would be with buying organic and then also soaking, because sometimes organic gets contaminated as well. So that would be the most risk reduction would be, soaking your organic produce or buying organic. If you're worried about nuts like peanuts, walnuts, pecans, all those sorts of things, they can be contaminated with mold. That's a potential issue. Again, if you soak them with baking soda and then rinse, 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 and then if you want them to be crispy again, you dehydrate them in the oven. So you put them in those glass baking sheets, put it in the oven at the lowest temperature. And for larger nuts like walnuts and pecans, it's going to be about 12 hours worth, give or take, of dehydrating those nuts out so they're nice and crunchy again. Or you can take those soaked, cashews or peanuts and turn them into a butter or a milk, for example, like cashew milk. So depending on what you want to do with it, but what you want to do is you want to soak them in baking soda to reduce that mycotoxin load. And interestingly, when it comes to corn, if you look at countries that traditionally use corn, like South and Central America, they love using corn for things like tortilla. But did you know that before they use the corn for cooking, they soak the corn in a lime water, which is a very alkalinizing water? It also helps reduce mycotoxins from corn. And the result is what's called, if it's still in its whole form, it's called hominy. So the corn is nixtamal, and this process is called nixtamalization. So it's called hominy if it's whole, or a masa harina flour if they then take that soaked and treated corn and turn it into flour for baking. And that's what they use to make tortillas. And there's a very delicious flavor that comes with that because of that process of soaking in alkaline lime water. So you want to see if you can, purchase the masa harina flour if you like baking with corn, like using corn flour, or tortillas with corn that has been nixtamalized. So even calling the company and asking them how do they treat their corn would be before making it into that product would be an interesting thing if you're commonly consuming those products. So if it's a big staple in your diet, then it would be worth, again, just reducing the load on your body. We're trying to just do harm reduction. And then number 6 strategy, and I'll give you a bonus one at the end, but this one here is that you want to support the natural detoxification process of your body of estrogen. So again, that's focusing on supporting your liver health, supporting your gut health, and the gut health of your microbiome, your gut microbiome, which is also involved in the process of estrogen detoxification. If you want to dive deeper into this, I suggest, if you haven't yet done so, watching the video, How to Improve Estrogen Detoxification for Better Hormone Health. If you're listening to this in the podcast, you can, find that as a previous podcast episode, not many episodes ago. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go into my search bar on YouTube and search for that using that title, and that video will pop up. This video has all the information you need to optimize your body's ability to naturally detoxify any estrogen, whether it's your estrogen or xenoestrogen or phytoestrogen, because even if it's a good estrogen, it needs to get out once it's been used. It can't just float around in the body, constantly. It has to be broken down by the liver and excreted through primarily the gut, a bit through the kidneys. So you want to make sure that you're properly supporting that system. Now, while this was about food and water, I did mention cosmetics and personal care products. So there's also a video, how most cosmetics harm your hormone health and which ones to use instead. This also covers personal care products. This also is important for men because research is showing that men and women are exposing themselves to chemicals through their skin, through these cosmetics and personal care products. So you'll want to watch that because I give strategies on how to choose the best cosmetics and personal care products that will not harm your hormone health. It's that important. Like, I really encourage you to watch that if you haven't watched that yet, or to listen to it if you haven't listened to yet on the podcast. So the take-home message is you need to be aware and intentional around the xenoestrogen, the toxic estrogen exposure that we are all being exposed to, and engage in those 6 risk reduction strategies for hormone and whole body health. So your whole body health depends on this. And I hope you found this useful. I hope you can engage in these strategies. If you feel overwhelmed, just choose one strategy to start with. And as you get comfortable with that strategy, then get the next strategy on board and the next strategy on board. Just make sure you're always progressing in a positive direction, because that's going to be the way that you can thrive in this life, this beautiful life that we have. We deserve to feel our best. We are not meant to suffer from these environmental toxins. And I believe, I am a strong believer that when we make these strategies a habit, and I can tell you that I have all of these strategies locked and loaded in my home. It's what I do. It's a lifestyle. And yes, it did take a while to add these on over time, but I'm finding that it's just the benefits are just so lovely, just experiencing that amazing, whole body health, that hormone balance is really worth that effort. So I hope you can stay motivated to engage in those strategies. Rewatch this or listen to this again if you need to. And I hope that you found this helpful. If you found this helpful, please save this, share this, subscribe. Remember, sharing is caring. You never know when someone might just benefit so much from this piece of wild wisdom. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, day, or night, depending on when you catch this. Bye.